going to be providing that over the course of what was termed the break. So that's next week. Those meals will continue. And actually, last Friday, in the spirit of equity and trying to make sure our families have resources, we distributed a number of computers to our elementary students and continued to provide for our secondary students as well. We're still, what we started to hear is more and more the need for the technology, and there are still hearing some students that still need access, and we have to still determine how we're going to make sure that we address and get technology in their hands as well. Um, the other part I just want to reference is this the element of what last week was supposed to be and then what it is. The governor issued an executive order last year. If you recall, it was supposed to be spring break for during what we would call a regular year. This is clearly not a regular year. Things have made us have to change the way we do things, and the governor has been giving us a number of directives as to how we have to address our work. And one of those is that he has shared that instruction needs to continue over the course of next week. We're mindful of that and abiding by that. So we've had to notify our staff and our students that this is the way that we're going to operate for next week. But we're also cognizant that, or aware that, some families and students and staff are observing for various religious reasons, and we want to support them in that. So, we're trying to talk to staff and look at ways that we, whether it's their participation on those specific days that they observe, homework assignments that maybe aren't necessarily due on those days, or things that we want to make sure that we're caring for and respecting those family needs and religious obligations that individuals are participating in. And the last piece is just making sure that, obviously, that, just a reminder to our community, to our students, and to everybody that, during this period of time, we need to remain safe. Our fields remain open, and we've seen a lot of family members and community members use the facility, and we want that, but we need to make sure that we're safe in all our efforts, whether it's getting food or whether it's, going out to the community or using our facility, specifically our track. So, and for the most part, everyone has. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't just take a moment to also talk to just a quick editorial to our students and everybody else that, and I think we'll put out more correspondence. Technology and the way we behave during this period of time is really, really important, and utilizing it appropriately is just as important. We've started to have some sessions and with our community members and using various technology, and we've noticed that maybe we're not participating as appropriately as we want to. We've had some students not necessarily disrupting some learning sessions. So just want families to be aware, if you're watching, that our code of conduct is still in play, still important for us to consider, even when we're living in a virtual world. And during this time, more than any other time, but irrespective, we should always be respectful of the spaces that are provided for adults and for our students and others. And more to come on that, but I just, that's more a message to our families and to our students more specifically, because there have been some learning sessions that have been developed where we've seen be disrupted by behavior of a few, not all. And these learning sessions are really important as we try to work with our families. So with that, again, just a sincere thank you to everyone that's working hard, and on behalf of our children, families, students, staff, our entire community.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. And I, again, want to reiterate just thanking everybody, central administration, our educators, staff, custodial staff, buildings and grounds, technology, and the community members that are out there in person to make sure that we're well. A lot of community members work at hospitals and also have to go into work for their jobs that really keep the infrastructure of our community going. And so, we're all just, every day is a new day, and really appreciate everybody's emails and any ideas that you have, sending them into the board and to Dr. Sanchez and sharing it with your teachers as we go along. We're all learning together, and where we can collaborate, this is the time, we need to continue to collaborate as we do in the world that we knew it before and the world as we're going forward. So with that, and just thank you, Dr. Sanchez, for all those words. And whenever you're ready, we can.
Just wondering, any questions from the board?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions.
Aaron, your audio's a little tough to hear.
That's a well, Aaron.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
All right, I'm gonna try to switch rooms here and go. Can you hear me now?
Very difficult.
Yeah. May want to find a different spot. That might be the reason. I'm not sure.
Or you could always call in also as a backup.
Okay, maybe we'll.
I'm gonna switch spots.
Okay.
I'm gonna try switching spots. All right, give me one.
I don't know if maybe we should go while he's looking for a new space. I'm just wondering do we have an understanding of how many families we're talking about who don't have reliable internet access at this point in time? Or have we sort of made the determination that we are satisfied that families do have internet access? Because I know we're sending out the attendance forms over email and teachers are sending their assignments over email. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then the second part of the question is regarding student access to their school emails. I know that we are having our Claremont students, for example, do their work on Google Classroom, but they don't have their emails turned on, so they're not able to receive their assignments and their links from their teachers. And parents aren't able to forward them those emails and links either because they don't have an email that they can access on the Chromebooks. So for example, if a teacher said, view this worksheet or view this video, a parent would have to copy by hand on a piece of paper the link, put the link down, send it to their child, and then the child would have to enter that link into a computer separately, which is proving inefficient and cumbersome. So I just wanted to know what the thoughts were on opening up the email so that teachers could email their 3rd and 4th grade students directly, and that students would be able to sort of streamline the access to material.
I'll start with the first one in terms of access to technology and the internet. I can't say with certainty I have a solid number on that in terms of what that looks like, but I can share with you that I just anecdotally what I'm hearing is that there are still challenges that exist. We just recently, just today, we started to make a request for the aggregate information in terms of who are the kids we're not necessarily hearing from right now. I think it's a careful look through of those. There's been outreach to every family, but I think we need to more carefully kind of dissect to see why students may not be responding and trying to get an understanding of, in the gamut or of the options, is technology and the lack of internet access the reason why the child is not participating. So all that to say in the right now is that we're trying to collect information on that, but I don't have a solid number to know if it's 5, 10, or 15 or 100 kids. We know a lot of students are participating, but we're going to look at the data that we got and try to carefully understand the needs. And then as we've done, and from the beginning, is make sure that we can give them the tools that they need. And I would say just beyond the technology, what we're hearing is even just simple paper pencil for kids or for some children. The technology is obviously an important tool right now, but there's other, supplies that we're hearing that families need at this period of time that they, in an effort to complete some of the assignments. So I would say more to come on it, but it's definitely something we're very mindful of at this time. Mike, do you want to respond to the email piece? I see you in the meeting.
Yeah, I came back in just to answer this question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So it was something that had been discussed. We actually did not have open emails from below 9th grade up until about 2 weeks ago. We opened up for 6th, 7th, and 8th in order to provide, again, that same opportunity for our students to be able to communicate with their teachers. My only concern about going down into the lower elementary schools is only because we really haven't done any sort of professional development for our teachers with how to use it with their students. We haven't really done any sort of teaching with our students on how to use it effectively and use it safely. It just, I would be concerned that, for us that have tech savvy parents, that it would work okay. But I think that there could be a large percentage of our students that may have some difficulties. It's just another layer of difficulties that we may be putting upon our kids and our parents to be able to kind of like self-teach themselves and then their kids.
I just challenge us to look at that, because the way that the information is coming now, it is presuming a technological savviness of parents. So we've already sort of crossed that bridge. We are expecting them to be tech savvy enough to not only download and read the content that's provided, but then find a way technically to get that over to their kids when they don't necessarily have a conduit for doing it. So I'm hoping we can look at that again.
It's certainly something that we can talk about.
Anything else from the board? Not so well.
I just, can you hear me? I'm sorry?
We can't hear you, Aaron.
Now?
You may want to call in, Aaron.
Lisa, you're also muted, Lisa.
Aaron, you might want to call in.
Maybe let me try calling again.
Okay.
So
Anybody else?
is delivering the materials to a student email the only option? Don't all the teachers have the parent emails to deliver it straight to the parent, or is that not sort of allowed in the chain of distribution? I'm just trying to figure out, like, if the child not having access to the email is the issue, can't the materials be emailed to the parent for the lower grades?
So that, I mean, in my experience, that is what is happening. And the issue is, if I want to share the content with my child and they're working on a Chromebook, the Chromebook has blocked the child receiving any kind of email on that device. So I either have to print out the content. So you're assuming that I have access to a printer, I have paper, I have ink, and I'm able to print it out. So I either have to print out the content, or I have to take the links and I have to handwrite them out correctly. And then my child has to then upload that into their web browser on a computer. So
Okay.
that entire process is taking a very long time.
So the issue is the security features on the Chromebooks. Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll say we'll bring it back and continue the discussion. I appreciate it. I mean, this is the type of feedback we need from families and from board members, of course. And we can go back and begin to look at it. And, clearly we went in with one path, and, whatever we can do to help support and make it efficient, we'll look at.
I just had one question or issue to bring up, not necessarily get answer now, but I was on the call today, I'll talk later, the school board association call with other districts, and grading was definitely a topic that the districts are talking about. I know Stephen mentioned it, that they're looking at it on his call today. But there's a, really wide range of, kind of when you go to pass fail. Some are going pass fail already, some are going to wait, some are going pass fail already for the fourth quarter. I know, and we're still, it's a moving target. They talked about, junior year in colleges being such a key year. And if is it fair if one kid has a 95 and someone else has a 70 and you turn them both into a pass? Kind of what's the message there? So there's no good answer on any of that, but a lot of other boards were talking about it. I'm sure we've started talking about it. But just want to bring up as an issue I know we'll need to address and communicate. And I don't know if it's one you necessarily get a lot of feedback from students and community on. Certainly going to be opinions. I don't think there's an answer, but just want to monitor.
Yeah, no, that discussion's already started. I know the secondary leaders have begun to look at this, so we'll soon be providing you a more formal recommendation.
Okay.
But it's a hot topic. We realize it.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, should we turn over to our presentation? Okay.
One second, Ray. Yes, we'll open it up to the audience after the budget presentation. Is that okay? Did anybody
Yeah.
have any questions? Maybe you can go into the Q&A right now, unless you want to ask your question, because I know it is officially, a topic. So if there's anybody that wants to ask a clarifying question from the attendees, please raise your hand and Brian will unmute your mic and show your camera.
But that's after the presentation, right?
Right.
Yeah, but we brought up the fact that we did an update on, we brought this as an agenda item. So I just wanted to be,
Maybe do we want to just do the presentation? We can open up for
Okay.
both. Is that okay?
okay, it doesn't seem
Okay.
like anybody has a question right now.
Yeah,
so-
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we do
Yeah.
that first.
Okay.
okay.
All right. Brian, you're going to be pushing it?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Can you hear me
So-
through the phone?
Yes.
Much better.
Oh. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Okay, I was just wondering, because it seems like some of our students need some FaceTime with teachers, and I saw some other districts were doing like Zoom and Google Meet meetings, like to actually go through instruction before breaking off into doing work. I saw you had included in the update, Dr. Sanchez, about Google Meet. Can you just speak a little bit about that and any like union issues that might be preventing that, or something we can do to further use Zoom or further use Google Meet to actually have face-to-face instruction?
Yeah, so let me just start with Zoom, because Zoom we have to be very cautious of for data privacy reasons in terms of utilizing that tool with our students. So it's a great tool. Obviously, we're using it here, but as it relates to using it with our students, I would just pause to say Google Meet and Google Classroom is probably our better platform at this point, solely from a data privacy perspective. I know Zoom is working with the state to see if they can be what we'll term as an approved vendor, but that's not where it is at this point. So that's, I just want to speak to that part of it. The other aspects of, the face-to-face, that's an evolving discussion. We've had some, very collegial and conversations with our staff about this, with union leadership around it, and we'll continue to do so. I think we're also starting to provide some professional development to our staff so they feel more comfortable in doing screencasting and voiceovers, and so more to come on it. I can't say we're there just yet, but I would be prepared to share more in a subsequent meeting. But I also think too that I think some of the tools that we're providing our staff and the training is going to lead to more not only engaging lessons, but also where students are going to be able to see and hear their staff members, whether it's pre-recorded, live. You'll see the whole gamut over the course of time.
Thank you. I would just advocate for more of the live sessions, just because I think some of our kids really need some help with instructions and how to go over stuff, especially with stuff like math.
Right.
And the live would really benefit them. And it doesn't have to be a full school day, but even if it's an hour or 2 hours where they're just going back and forth and able to explain things and give instruction, it would prevent a lot of kids from falling behind.
Understood.
All right, that's all I had on my end. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I would just add, I know Stephen on his Facebook Live today, I thought gave a very honest answer, which is, we just got into this. Teachers are definitely trying. Some are just ahead of, on the technology curve than others. But that's the goal. But I think I thought he gave a very honest, it's not going to happen in every area immediately, given the situation, but it's certainly the focus. So I thought that was again, just a good, honest answer to that question.
I don't know if I could chime in here I've been pushing for synchronous learning since this whole started. And so I don't, my opinions on that I think are well known and haven't changed. I know everyone is thinking about the kids in the district all the time and the parents and the teachers and how difficult this is for everyone. Even a 10, 15-second phone call goes a really long way. So in the extent that if we don't get there anytime soon, and we're all working really hard on it, that's okay. I hope that all of the check-ins continue because it is really, really important.
I agree. Any other questions, comments? All right, so I'm going to jump into the budget. This is the most updated, this budget represents the most updated numbers that we have from the state. Just yesterday, the state education department finalized, or not the state education department, but the state approved their budget. And so, the beginning part is sort of a review, things we've discussed in the past. Still, I'd encourage us to have continuous conversations. We have some other board meetings that I think are really important for us to continue to discuss the budget. And then Alita is going to provide some details around the numbers related to the proposed budget. So Brian?
Got it.
So a reminder, no matter what, and with all our discussions, that this focus is on our children, the 5,100 students we have in our district. This clearly, within here, we talk about staffing, we talk about programming, we talk about facility needs, but ultimately it's about the children and providing them the setting and the supports they need to do well over the course of a school year. This is a reminder of our priorities, from supporting all needs to class size, to professional learning, to extended learning opportunities, addressing facility needs, social emotional aspects of our children that we need to consider, the 3-year plan, and being fiscally responsible. What I would share with this too is that some of these, these were priorities upon entering the year. And I shared in various meetings that, being conscious of what this time period of not necessarily not being in classroom with your teacher, the impact it might have on children's academic needs and social emotional needs is something that we're strongly considering as we think about next year. This is a reminder of class size and what we said our class size would look like for the upcoming school year, staying within policy. And then some of the facility needs that we're looking at for the upcoming year. And this still continues to be a discussion. We still need to meet with our facility subcommittee, but specifically around the library. One thing I just want to note for the board and those watching, the outdoor space at the middle school might be a project we might be able to do this year and now. And I'd like to present that back to the facility subcommittee, so we might be able to take it off our capital improvements for the 2021 year. So specifically the outdoor area, we actually had a meeting and a discussion. Jared Mance, our director of facilities, Alita Zuber, and I chatted about the outdoor space at the middle school. And it seems like we might have the opportunity to do it this year, which would shift our capital projects for 2021. So these are questions I posed at the last board meeting and said there weren't any answers. So I started checking off the box saying, I think we have some answers. First was, how will voters cast their vote? We don't necessarily know how they'll cast their vote, but we do know that the budget vote has been moved to June 1st at this time, always subject to change. Will state aid be reduced? That question will be answered, and I'll share that, have Ms. Zuber share that in subsequent slides. Will there be any mandate relief? The answer to that at this point is no. One question that still remains unanswered is what might we want to consider now to address the future. We're still looking at things that potentially were in next year's budget, but because of the reduction in expenditures for this year, that we might be able to purchase and remove from next year's budget or provide us greater flexibility. Will the federal government's decision have an impact on school finances? The answer to that is yes. I would say the state found a creative way to use the federal funds, not necessarily to increase state aid, but to keep it stable. But again, further discussions. And is there an opportunity in this crisis? The answer to that is yes, there's, and we're looking at really carefully what I mean by that specifically, or what are some opportunities of things that we might be able to address this year that we thought we might be addressing next year, whether facility improvements or pre-purchasing some materials that we thought that we know we're going to need in 2021. These are questions that still remain unanswered for us. Some of them, the impact of school closures on student learning and what should we consider for budget and social emotional needs. Will the length of time impact our future programming? I would say yes to all those, or yes to that question. But also, considering the closures and the impact, that's something that we're still studying and trying to understand. And will there be mandate to offer specific programming? At this point, there isn't, but that could always change. This slide just shows just some of the things that we're talking about, trying to look at facility improvements now, some of the requests, and trying to address them currently with this year's 1920 funding, and then potentially finding ourselves being able to redistribute next year's proposed funds in a different way to support different needs. So all in all, and Alita is going to provide some further details. The current levy remains at 1.51%. Our budget amount is the same at $137,558, but our estimated appropriate fund balance has increased significantly to $4.9 million based on the revenue projections from the state. So I'm going to turn it over to Alita, who'll walk us through some of the numbers.
So I just wanted to give you an overview of what some of the major changes was from the 2.4 that I estimated for the deficit to the 4.9 that now I'm currently estimating as a deficit. We had to make some adjustments, and one of the biggest adjustments is our BOCES aid. Our BOCES aid is based on our prior year expenses. So because of the year, the current year, that we're not expending as much in BOCES services, we're going to see less aid. So we did an estimate to reduce the BOCES aid. The state doesn't accommodate for that. They use a stagnant number based on the reporting that we do in September. So we have to accommodate for that ourselves. So we're looking at a reduction of about $756,000 in BOCES aid. So that wasn't part of the governor's spreadsheet. But again, we have to make adjustments for that because we know those reductions are going to be real. The other biggest area is transportation aid. Because we're not using all of our transportation services, we're not having to use transportation at this time, and we're not paying a bill. Our transportation aid, again, is based on this year's transportation expenses. So we're going to see a reduction in aid of about $500,000. So if you total those amounts plus the additional aid that we're receiving in building aid, you have a reduction of 1.1 that the governor did not take into account in his budget, budget presentation. The pandemic adjustment is the amount that he's actually reducing our aid by. So he's reducing the aid that he's proposing to give us by 826, but he's saying, wait a minute, Federal CARES Restoration Act, the stimulus aid package, is going to take care of that. But if we trust that, then that's fine. But my understanding is that he's going to be evaluating the revenues throughout the year, throughout next year, and determining whether or not he can actually give those funds to the school district. The other thing to note that he promised, if you recall, that we would get about $844,000 in January's budget. We're not getting that. He took that out. So he put us back at zero there's no increase from last year to this year. So the January aid amount is completely disregarded. So the total amount of aid that we're losing, not including the 826 that he's saying that he will pay, he will restore us with the federal CARES, is about $2 million or $1.9 million or $2 million. Brian, can you move the slide? So how do we come with the $4.9 million deficit? Again, the deficit prior to April 1st was $2.4 million. Now we're at a state aid decrease of $2 million. We adjusted our interest. We reduced it a little bit more by $75,000 and adjusted the sales tax, looking at what the first quarter revenue is probably going to be. We projected about half of what we thought it was going to be. And then the other three quarters, we reduced it by 20%. So that's $320,000 less than what we've had in the past. And then the other area that we receive revenue is called BOCES refund prior year expenditures. And basically it's a refund that we get from BOCES based on the services that we receive from them. So again, we're receiving less services because schools are closed. So there's a reduction that we're anticipating of about $75,000. So that's how we get to the $4.9 million deficit. That slide should not be there.
Okay, want to open it up for questions for the board. Just unmute your mic for questions for Alita or Ray.
I know that we had said that this year we might be able to do some additional capital projects that maybe were on deck to be done at a different time. So can you just briefly explain where that sort of fits in to us also having a deficit, just for anybody who's confused or wondering and listening at home?
Are you referencing facility?
Yes.
Yeah, so we, like, just give you a sense, there are some projects that we anticipated doing. These are separate from the capital line. These are facility improvements. Let's just say carpeting of the auditorium. That's one that I would say that one could argue is partially a safety issue because the carpeting is ripped up, and there's been an issue since it was first installed, and So that might be an area that it is in last year's budget, but can be reduced if we can address it now. Alita and I looked at a list. Can you think of some others, Alita, that we looked at? She froze. Okay. Well, there's a list, and I can give it to the board and to the, I can discuss it at a later date. But we did look at some of those items with Mr. Mance, our director of facilities, to say, is there anything now that we might be able to address? The question for us, when we confirm all that is, do we want to reduce those lines, or do we want to reallocate it to address some other needs that we have for our students? If we want to carry a 4.9 fund balance as well. I think we could probably unmute everyone.
What is I guess, the plan to build this budget differently, seeing how the governor will be revisiting quarterly? Is there any difference in how we're going to plan to?
Yeah, so this is clearly this is fresh and new for all of us, right? And I think we lost the leader, but I want to give her a time when she gets back on to address that question as well. She and I went through various scenarios. Some districts, just hearing what others might be doing, they may phase in cuts over the course of time because of the lack of revenue coming in, or specific dollars that they anticipated. That's one way or one approach one could take. Use of, and Alita can speak to this differently, if we have to use reserves in some cases to balance and address the funding, that might be, something that we need to consider, but Alita can give you the details on what that looks like. But, the broader question for us right now is do we maintain our budget as is? The appropriated fund balance has basically doubled. Then, if you recall, we were at 2.4 and hoping that things would continue to go down because we anticipated, as is the pattern, that the state would give us more money based, after the governor's budget. But that clearly things have changed completely, and the financial climate has changed completely, in a very short period of time.
And I think it's important to also note the financial climate of our tax base has changed. We have a lot of people in the community living paycheck to paycheck now that are really squeezed by these tough times, renters, homeowners alike. So I know now, there's a lot still going on, a lot of information still to discuss, but I was just wondering, are we still looking to have a 1.51 tax levy increase with this current deficit, or is that number going to change as well?
Well, I think that was, in prior conversations, we've had discussions of around that very topic. We're cognizant and very, very aware of how this is impacting not only our state, but what's the impact it's having on our local community. We're all very, conscious of that. And I think that bottom bullet of creating a fiscally responsible budget has always been our focus. That may shift now. Clearly, we have to consider what's happening outside in our world and how it's impacting, here in Ossining. But I think essentially answer your question, we need to have that conversation here at the board table and determine, the finances, and balancing what our kids need, and then also what are the dollars associated with the ultimate plan.
And is there a way that we can, maybe in the next couple weeks or so, Alita can provide, again, with the reserves that we were looking at, what the state mandate is for all those reserves?
Yes.
Just because with that now, essentially doubling that deficit, we're going to have to find money somewhere. And again, as you said, the board has been great in the last few years with being fiscally responsible. So we want to find that balance between asking the taxpayers and, dipping into our own reserves as well.
Understood.
Well, hey, no, when Alita joins us back, I guess, just as a question, the sales tax projections, I know she's throwing some numbers out there. It would just be good to understand, get a little more detail at a future time as to where those are coming from and how comfortable we are with that on the surface. It sounds 20% reduction, sounds like it could be, we may need to relook at that. So just, interested in knowing more about that.
Alita, are you on now? I see that you got a via phone call.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we had a meeting today with our business officials across the region, the area, and basically that 20% came from an estimate of what other business officials are doing, but no one really, we reached out to the county and haven't gotten any response yet. I know they're very busy, so I don't fault them for that, but we had to give a number. I had to give you a number.
And are there some, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's some, due to the circumstances, there's some funds that I think that there's some Title I funds maybe that they're going to allow for carryover or something. Isn't there?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, I think there's a bit more leniency in place for some of the carryover that's going to occur.
Yeah, so we haven't received anything official. I just had the conversation actually with Nancy De La Cruz yesterday because, there's the question of how much, let me just start. We know that we're not expending in some areas, we're expending less than what we anticipated. So if we look at some of our title funds, there might be areas, although most of our title funds go to salaries, where we might be able to carry over some of those funds into the following year, which would give us some flexibility, or we can use it to offset some other costs. The problem is that I think by law, we've only been able to carry about 10% over. So the question becomes, will they allow us, if we have more, to carry over more to use for various programming? So your Title I, your Title II, your Title III, your Title IV, those are all ones, those are still questions that linger. Other questions that we don't have yet is, let's use MBK grants, we have mentoring grants, we have all kinds of other state grants that aren't necessarily being spent down the way that we anticipated. And it would be nice to know from the state that they gave us the flexibility, if that money was available to us and allocated to us, that we can use it for the future years. Will that directly impact our budget? Will it make significant changes? I wouldn't say those are huge changes that would happen, but clearly, every dollar counts. So if we can use it next year, we'd love that to be a potential that we can consider, or the state would consider in this case.
So in terms of, let's just say, we're going to need to provide instruction this summer for many students, and we'll need to go, and let's hope we can go back to our facilities. Can we take a look at what those costs might be in terms of estimating that, in terms of potential transportation, helping our special needs students catch up, and all of our students for that matter, catch up. And what I know it's really, really hard to do, but just keeping in mind that, if we're going to do a shift back to in-person instruction, it's hard to say where, if we're going to be out for the rest of the year. And I know other states are, and we're the hardest hit state. So everybody can make their assumptions. So assuming we don't go back, if we didn't, or even if we go back later time in mid-June, let's say, but still we need to get students caught up. If we can do an estimate or some kind of estimate. And I know there's issues in terms of, the schools are very hot during the summer. But if we're going to have a lot of students there, I don't know if there's, I know Catherine brought it up earlier in one of our meetings about portable air conditioners. So we could, try and deliver instruction the best that we can, and to get students back on track for the following year. So if we could take a look at those numbers.
So yeah, so you bring up, and there's a lot of variables. Normally I'd like to present something that we're really sort of solid on. I think we have I think our next meeting on the 14th, and, in between there, I'd like to give you more information. And I would say that there might be a need for even an addition. We've talked about it. We haven't necessarily solidified a potential other meeting just to continue the dialogue, to refine this further, because, we've, for years, we know that summer programming is critically important for our students. We are on path to provide services for more students over the course of the school year or the summer, not only through our general fund, but various grant opportunities and other funding sources that have become available. But a broader question is there a need to expand it, or, and maybe it's not always just academic. I think we need to really be conscious of social emotional needs of our children that are coming back to our schools with different needs. To say that they're coming back the same, I think it wouldn't be a fair statement. I think there's going to be some different needs that they have, and I think we need to adapt our system around that. We can go back and begin to think more about it, and try to make sure that it's considered in the course of the budget as well. And the space, the question of, we can give you an estimate on air quality costs, in terms of AC, if you wanted to consider that. But I would say that it'd probably have to be at some sort of expense of something else if at this point.
Thank you.
Would it be worthwhile investigating the AC costs to also investigate solar panel costs? Because then wouldn't you be able to provide AC through energy created by solar panels?
We'll look at everything. The idea of solar panels, as you know, we've been talking about that for some time. But we'll look and converse about it. It's whether we'd be ready to make a decision, by the time we have to have a board adopted budget. I'm not sure, but we'll continue to look at it.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying for the long term, for the
Yeah.
summer needs as we continue to go forward. Once the pandemic ends too, I think it'd be a good way to further invest in being energy efficient while also providing comfort to the kids and a proper learning environment.
That's fair.
Okay.
I'll go,
Greg?
couple questions. I guess, Alita, your comment on the BOCES aid is an interesting one. I'm just wondering if that's an intended consequence of the budget. I know that's how they've calculated it historically, but again, assuming we were out the rest of the year and everyone has, whatever, 25% less BOCES aidable costs, everyone's going to be in a huge hole. And again, there's probably an easy yes or no answer. My guess would be that they didn't budget for that decrease, and they're budgeting to have to fund those amounts, and they could come up with a formula that said, we'll do it based on, if nothing else, like the average of the last 2 years, or we'll go back to 2 years ago. But hopefully between now and the 14th, we could really, get some clarity on that. Because that, it gets, it's a tough. It wasn't really, I guess, a budget conversation. It's really more of the, unintended consequence of if schools were to get canceled for much longer. I don't know that anyone's thought through that BOCES aid line. So hopefully we can jump up and down and get your superintendents and everyone else looking at that. Because again, I wouldn't think that the state had, I would assume the state has budgeted the same amount of BOCES aidable money going into next year. They didn't assume 25% less, thinking that schools would get canceled. But that's one we should get answered.
Right.
What else? I know, we're definitely going to have some money left over this year from not being in school. We talked about, extra sales tax we're collecting this year that we didn't have in this year's budget, and just sort of normal operations. So I don't know how far this budget will get past delayed, but the longer it gets delayed, the more maybe intel we could get on how much we think we may have left over. I mean, I guess if schools got canceled, we might have a easier to project surplus at the end of the year that we could factor in. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic, but I know that's one of the challenges. What else? I know one of our last presentations when we were thinking we might get more state aid, there was you had scenario A and B or 1 and 2. I think one was, it was like 500,000 of cuts that you thought could be done without much, if any, impact. I guess curious if those are factored in yet. I guess just to piggyback on what Aaron said, I definitely think we really need to balance the budget with the taxpayers' ability, and we have reserves, and if this isn't a year we're not ready to use some reserves, I don't know why we have reserves. I know we're not using it all in a year, and I know we got probably several years ahead that we'll have to deal with some of this stuff, but I think we got to really be focused on both sides, which we always do, but we just got to keep talking about both sides. And then I guess sort of picking up at Lisa what you just said, I don't know in the budget how to do it, but it does seem like between increased summer school, student support we may need to do into next year. Thinking even if we had to do a PACE graduation in August, I've heard some talk about some spring sports getting played in the fall potentially. I just want to, hopefully we can figure out in the budget how to have some placeholders for that stuff to occur if needed. And if we use it, I guess that's great because we used it. And if we don't need it, then it's just money that, I just don't want to sit in an opportunity and say we can't do X because it wasn't in the budget. Again, it seems like whether it's, just plugging more from reserves as a placeholder, one-time non-recurring type costs, that seems like why we have the reserves. And again, it seems like at the end of this year, we'll have, I'm assuming some money that we could use to fund that kind of thing. And I guess lastly, and I know we go back and forth some semantics. I know the 4.9 million, to me, that's a budgeted surplus. I think last year, we had it was last year a 2.5 million budget, a budget deficit. And at the end of the year, we ended up with, I don't know, I have it in front of me, but 3 or 4 million surplus. So I think we just need to remind ourselves as we talk about what the budget deficit looks like, that I would say, having looked at our numbers over the years, that doesn't likely mean that's what our actual will look like. But we've talked a lot about just the budgeting mechanics of how that works. I guess we'll have to figure that out. If we do some things like the AMD project, I guess the question is whether that means we bring our capital line down because it's not in there, or whether we're then looking to add something in its place. I know the library project looked like it may be bigger than the placeholder in there, so we don't need to answer that now, but I guess we'll have to talk through that. I think that's it.
Okay. Anybody else before we open it up to the audience?
I guess I would just say, leave off by saying, as we know, we're going to have some increases in areas, undoubtedly, that we're going to have to put funding towards, whether it be the SEL category or even special education. There's just going to be compensatory services because of the deficit. And I think there's those two categories are something we need to make sure we're very mindful of when we build this budget, because it's going to be unavoidable. And I think we have to kind of compensate for the fact that understandably the distance learning is not going to be sufficient enough to for a lot of students, and to keep them from possibly falling back next year, you know, coming back behind the curve. And you know, I think we need to do as much as we can to be proactive so that these students don't end up being, I don't even know what the plan academically would be for that, to make sure that this doesn't come back to bite some kids, and that some kids are not, you know, left back because of something that's out of their control. So I think we need to make sure that we're pouring, you know, extra attention in the budget into those areas to make sure that we're making up for lost time, really.
Yeah. So I just want to respond to a few things. First of all, I couldn't agree more in terms of, you know, the needs, and, you know, both you and Greg noted, you know, what we'll term as placeholders, you know, potentially for the unforeseen. Let's use the graduation example, you know, that Greg brought up in terms of, you know, do we hold a graduation in August for students, or July, you know, just, and if so, what's the cost associated with it? That would be next year, not this year. If spring sports are spring sports are played in the fall, what would that look like, and what's the cost associated with that? So it's a delicate balance that we don't necessarily have. We'd want some time to think about, and we don't have a lot of time. Because, you know, on the other hand, you know, in the comments that were shared earlier is, you know, can we decrease the budget, you know, slightly? And we had some conversations about that, but we also have some fillers now that we need to be conscious of that might for what we'll term as the unknown, and whether those fillers are called unknown and potential, you know, a responsive code where we can, you know, adapt to the needs of the students and other things that are surfacing that we didn't necessarily foresee, but know that we have to foresee a change. Those are conversations that, you know, we need to continue to have internally. Because I agree with Melissa. I think we know something, there's going to be areas that we need to consider. How much of it we can predict and is still a question we're still struggling with, I guess, at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the board? Okay, Brian, if you'll bring up one of our community members so they could, and when your camera is, when you go live, so to speak, when your camera is visible to us and you're unmuted, please just state your name and your address, and please ask your question or give us your comments. So Brian?
Yep, I'm working on it. Sometimes it takes a second.
And and it's a little
Yep.
delay.
Keep trying here. One more time.
Aaron, I think an audience member just walked behind you a second or two ago. Oh, got another audience member.
Yeah, he asked for permission to interrupt. I kept on mute though.
Any questions?
There you go, Roger. You are live.
All right, hang on one second. Can everybody see me?
Yep. Hey, Roger.
Hi, everybody. Roger Bhattacharya at 16 Holbrook Road. First of all, I want to start off with Ray. I just want to thank you for really the fantastic work you've done so far in keeping everybody apprised of everything going on, all of the stewardship you've done in terms of your how you handled this entire crisis. So I know a lot of other parents feel the same way. So really great job. I just want to thank you and tip my hat. If I was wearing a hat, I'd tip it to you. Good job.
Thank you. It's a team effort. There's a lot of people involved. So thank you, though.
Great. So a couple of things. I guess the first question is for you, Alita. The numbers that you showed in terms of what would potentially be saved for the transportation and some of the other line items, are those numbers based upon an April 30th closure time? And is there a scenario you've looked at from a financial standpoint of what that looks like if we were closed all the way to the end of June at the end of the school year? And what might that look like? I'm just curious about that. And then I have another part to a question that I want to ask just after I get that question.
So when you talk about the savings, are you talking about the savings slide that I showed a couple of board meetings ago?
Yes.
Okay, that was effective last year.
No,
So
no,
that
sorry. The
in-
one thing you just showed, not a couple of board meetings ago, that you showed earlier today.
Oh, so you mean the reduction in aid?
Yes, 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 correct, correct.
Okay. So the reduction in aid is based on an average, we prorated it by month.
Okay.
And we took, I think, a month and a half out. So it's not completely for the whole school year. It's for March, half of March, and all of April is what we took out, what we assumed that the reduction in expenses would be. And so then we took the estimated amount that we would get for our expenses. I believe the ratio is 70%. So we took 70% of that number.
Okay, so a couple of things about that, you know, I was looking at, because I know, you know, with my company, we do a lot of updates in terms of projections and forecasts around about COVID patients. You know, I'm in the pharmaceutical side of the business, but one of the things we're looking at, even if we do hit the apex in and around the end of April, if that's what they're projecting, that apex could probably stay there and remain there for at least until the next 2 to 3 months, because the amount of tests has yet to scale up, and they don't project that those number of tests that'll be needed to kind of make it safe for people to come back into schools will happen until at least the end of June, if not mid-July. That's the latest. And then you know, that would essentially keep that information being fed back to the state, along with other data points that the state will probably use, would essentially keep us closed until then. So that's something that you may want to look at a scenario in the next meeting of, if we're shut down till June, what does this look like? Whereas if, you know, you obviously have to show your current best known assumption, but just to show that assumption would be actually a good one to see, because it would show the total net effect of a full a school year closed till the end. So that's one.
The other thing to remember too is if we're having less expense, then that falls into fund balance. Right. So even though our appropriated fund balance seems very high, we're going to have more fund balance because we're having less expense in the current school year. So even though the 4.9 million seems really high, we're going to be saving some money to offset the decrease in the aid, the state aid.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's just good just to kind of see the scenarios, the what if, because I think it's right. Just helpful to get that full on perspective to the extent that we can, because, you know, this is something that no one could have possibly anticipated or planned and known the extent of how this would have been. It's just, there's no way. But so that's one. The other comment I'd like to make, this is for everybody on the board and Ray as well. I remember in the last meeting I was physically at, your director of facilities was there, and he actually made the statement that installation of solar panels would be at a zero net cost for the school district. And if that's the case, then is there any reason why we wouldn't want to do that sooner? And I think that's something that we should look at, and probably sooner, if that truly is a zero net cost, and understand all of that. To see if that's something that's feasible to do sooner rather than later. That's just one comment. And I have one last thing to say, and then I promise I'll give you back the time.
I know he was working with a cooperative of school districts and municipalities. So it's basically based on that timeline. It's not something that we stopped looking at. But I know he came back from a meeting that was part of a group of different municipalities that were going to be going into the agreement together. So I can get a status on where they're at with that, but it's not something that we're holding up.
Yeah, no, I wasn't insinuating that, but I think I'd love to know a little bit more about where we are. So if we could, the next board meeting, get an update on that, that would be excellent. Because then that gives us some progress going forward. Because, it's just a great time if we have that opportunity, especially it does two things. It obviously helps us to get, those people who are actually doing the solar panels, if it's a zero net cost, getting them to do it while no one is physically there in the building except for the few essential staff that are there. Okay, my last comment. Beyond the numbers I looked at today for the COVID stats, I looked at about 4 different economic models that were presented to me today. It's pretty damn scary. I'll tell you, it was basically the comments were made in at least 3 of them that what is yet to come will be a recession that's worse than 9/11 and the 2008 crash combined. We're looking at potentially like a 34 to 35% reduction in GDP. We're looking at pretty much long term that this won't be an immediate bounce back, that this will be actually a longer term, possibly even a 2, 3, 4 year type of a thing, because there isn't going to be enough money to sustain companies to keep people hired on payroll for a long time. So whatever we decide to do from a 2020-2021 budget by way of a tax increase, keep in mind that the hardships are very real. The expected level of bankruptcies that will actually go up because of the job losses that will be sustained will take many, many years for that to come back. That will have a detrimental impact back to our community. But this is looking pretty scary, and I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that the economic models, I know that there'll be new data and that'll get updated in real time. But even under the best case scenario, we're looking at about a 22% decline in GDP. That's worse than anything that we've seen since the Great Depression. So I'd like you to keep that in mind as a point of reference as you're talking about raising taxes at this point, and look at those different balances of where it is that monies can be moved and shifted from a reserve to cover what you need. And I know that you are looking at that, so I'm not saying that you're not. So I'm just kind of providing you with some level of information, some level of clarity that these economic models do take in a whole bunch of different real world assumptions, but it's taking data day by day in real time. And the data that I saw was data with yesterday's data, and it presented to me today, and presented to a bunch of people today. It wasn't just me, but I was one of the ones there. I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that this is going to be pretty severe.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger.
Okay.
Okay. I just wanted to, there was a question, it was right around, Ray, when we were talking about the delivery of instruction. We slightly touched upon it, but it was from Sharon Lorenz, and it was way back at the beginning of the presentation. What are you doing to help kids with IEPs? Video instruction is key to their success. That was just really along the lines of what we were talking about with all of our students. So maybe we could just, somebody could just reiterate a little bit about the challenges there. And again, I believe Sharon, you're still there. You'll be able to hear that we've been talking about what to do to help bring, help children, especially our most vulnerable, to deliver instruction over the summer, and some of the scenarios that our administration is looking at.
Yeah, I think there's a now piece to it that it's a fair question, and one we're having meetings about. We actually had a conversation with our director of PPS today, and we're having meetings with OT, PT teachers, and speech, I think actually even tomorrow, to engage in conversations about how we can continue to improve the delivery of instruction. And so I would say that, in the same vein as what Greg said before, that some teachers are evolving and getting better at it. And we're all in different places. I would say that, we're, at least for tomorrow, we're engaging in this conversation with some of our related service providers to see how they can meet the mandates specifically related to their IEPs, but obviously doing it in a virtual capacity now. But I'm happy to follow up at a later time to talk, specifically with Sharon.
I think I've shared this before, but I think it's worth sharing again. I know that the Department of Health and Early Intervention is fully virtual with all of their special education services, including providing special instruction, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy to families fully virtually. And this is children of the youngest age levels. So I just wanted to, I know that the Department of Health had offered various teletraining resources to its therapists, and they're up and running with that. So I'm just throwing that piece of information out there again.
Yep, no, we're aware.
So our students who have like the resource room time, can you kind of just speak to that a little bit as to how, like if there's any plan in place for that, how the resource room time would be allocated, or is that something that comes at a later date as well?
No, resource room teachers should be working with staff and their caseload of students. No different than our, regular ed teachers working with their entire classes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from our audience? Thank you so much for everybody who's on and in the audience as well. Just wanted to acknowledge. If there's any more questions, I think we're ready to go into move into our business of the board. Okay. That okay? We're good? All right.
Well, before
ahead.
we go, because I mean, this is clearly one of the most important decisions and one of the most difficult times we're doing this. We're doing this during one of the most difficult times, and that's the budget. I just, as we're going back, looking at the numbers, looking at programming, and being prepared for what I would say is probably a more robust presentation on I think the 14th. Is the next board meeting. Is there anything from the board that you want us, beyond some of the questions that you've added here, that we should be aware of and get you some more further information on? Is really sort of it would help us in general, whether it's a financial piece or whether it's programmatic or anything else. And if the answer is no, then I'm okay. We'll proceed and go forward.
I would just want to see, I'm sorry, after you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know that we had talked in an ideal world about before a global pandemic that we were going to clarify some of what the potential after school programming would actually look like and what it would cost. And so I would just, to the extent that you're able to provide further details on that, I would appreciate it.
Yep, we'll be ready.
I just wanted, if possible, the state guidelines and mandates for how much percentage each reserve fund has to have relative to the overall budget. Again, we obviously want to keep healthy reserves, but in economic hardship like this, it might be time to start dipping into them a little bit, especially to give our taxpayers some relief. So if you could give us a number, I know like the state recommends 4% on the general fund, but some of the stuff like tax certs and some of the other funds, if you could just get us the state mandated percentages on those too, I'd appreciate it.
There's not really state mandates. The only one that has a real state mandate is the TRS.
Okay.
It's very specific, but the other ones I can give you what the rationale is.
Okay, so like almost like state recs from like the comptroller, stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about, like recommendations or?
No, they don't really give you recommendations. They basically, when the auditors come in, they look at your reserves to determine whether or not they're reasonable, and that's what they do. But there's like no set. I can share with you a table. I can share with you a table that was done by Questar Boses that kind of summarizes the law and the different reserves. So I can do that for you. But there's the only one that has like a set limit on it is TRS.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess in that regard, I would just be curious to know. I mean, I think it's unavoidable that we're going to have to, or we potentially will be utilizing reserves at some point. My question would be, out of curiosity, is, given the circumstances, there's all kinds of regulations that are being, revisited. So would something like a bond rate still be affected? I guess it would be my question, given that we'll be put in a circumstance where we almost have no choice if we're in that circumstance where we have no choice to start using the reserves, is that something that's still being, I guess, held against districts financially?
Well, the whole, yeah, I think, I don't know if I can answer that personally. That would be a question for
Yeah, that's
Moody's.
like, I'm just throwing out there, like, I'm curious,
Yeah.
is that, you know, with
Yeah.
everything else being kind of like forgiven under the circumstances, I wonder if that would be
Right.
something too.
Right.
I mean, I guess, I mean, if it's possible, I know the challenge of this request, but we have whatever, the 49 million in reserves. We know we were at 6+% coming into this year. I'm gonna guess, and this is just my guess based on the numbers, but even if we go back to school, we're gonna have another 3 or 4 million to allocate somewhere at the end of June. So we're gonna have 53 million of reserves. If we don't go back in school, we might have another couple million. Just figuring like what kind of analysis we can get to help us understand what the end of June looks like, to help bring us back to April when we have to make this decision, to know that, again, I think we're going to have, every year we've had several million in surplus. And I know the challenge is we don't know that until the end of June. But if there's anything different this year, we take a stab at what that looks like, because we talk about going into reserves. I think it's unlikely we're going to go into reserves. We're actually just going to put less into reserves than we have in the past. But just trying to get a sense of
So
that.
Greg, I'm going to do a fund balance projection with a scenario showing that we start back up, and then we don't start back up. So I'll do those two scenarios. Yeah, I'll do those two scenarios.
Just another note from that school board conversation today, but there was some discussion about not finalizing our budget, which I'm not sure we would anyway, until after April 30th, because April 30th is the first of those 4 windows the governor has to potentially come back and say, I'm taking some money back out of the budget. So if we are able to wait till after April 30th, we at least have one of those milestones behind us that we could adapt for if there's something to adapt to.
I think also just if you could keep us abreast of, it sounds like with some of the federal funds, there's some requirements, maybe some requirements to those for contractors as well as employees. And basically it sounds like that won't be resolved until May, but there's a potential that we may have to pay out certain things in order to receive the additional funds. So some of the things that we see as surplus for this year, I think we wouldn't know until the end of May as to whether or not it's really going to be that much of a surplus. So just something that, obviously it's a moving target. There was some stuff on it today, and we should just keep an eye on those types of things that may creep up on us that we may not be thinking about.
Yep. That's a good point.
Yep. And I also want to, I know, Dr. Sanchez, we changed, as everybody knows, we changed the board meeting to tonight to try and have some more clarity. And, as you can see, it's very difficult. And just know with every executive order and with every guidance, it is a moving target. It's quite remarkable, moving target that it is, and what will be, and everything continues to get shifted. And some even of the deadlines that were given, we know that those aren't even realistic. So thank you to everybody in the audience who's asked those questions, and everybody on the board, because hopefully we hope to have more clarity, continue to have more clarity. But again, every day is a new day, and things are getting interpreted by by our attorneys throughout the state, and there's other states going through this as well. So it's a moving target, as everybody said. Before we, if anybody has anything else, I just wanted to clarify something. I tried to get to, there was a question from Sharon. I was trying to, Sharon Lorenz, who's in the audience, tried to see if she can ask it. It was just clarifying what Aaron had said about resource, that it is not what is going on. The resource room teachers are not able to directly engage with the students, with the children. I don't know. I know you're looking at all the resource room teachers, so that's just adding on to what Aaron said. I know you're working on that, and we're trying to figure out ways and towards to bring, it to be even throughout for all of our teachers. And we know that's difficult. It's been difficult. So again, to look into the resource teachers as well. So we're gonna, after we go into our resolutions, we're gonna go back for more board dialogue. And I know, a few of us have been on a variety of different town hall calls and so forth, and we'll talk more. So if everybody can hang in there for a little bit, and we'll go through our resolutions. Unless anybody else has a question about the budget. Okay. I'd like to take a motion to vote on resolution 5.1 and 5.2.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, 5.1, resolution to approve an agreement with the Ossining Support Staff Association concerning bereavement leave. Resolution 5.2, resolution to approve the revised school district calendar. Any questions or comments? And if the board could just, everybody unmute their mics right now, it'll make it a little easier. Any questions or comments?
So I just want to speak to the calendar if I can for a moment. The calendar change relates to April 13th and moving it to May 22nd. April 13th was a day that was going to be part of our spring recess, and we're recommending that that's moved to May 22nd. And again, I guess the question is whether, we're hopeful that we'll be back in school at that time, but if we aren't, then, we can discuss how that day applies to our school district and to our students.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. I take a motion to vote on resolution 6.1 through 6.3.
So moved.
Second.
6.1, resolution regarding certiorari refund payment, 172 Highland Avenue, LLC. 6.2, resolution to amend item 6.4 on the February 26, 2020 agenda. 6.3, resolution regarding interfund transfers. Illy, can you, what is the amount for that certiorari refund payment? I usually get to read it. I just don't have mine up. I believe it was something like $9,200.
It's 4,135.
Okay, for the current year. Okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I take a motion to vote on 7.1 through 7.5.
So moved.
Second.
7.1, resolution regarding rescinding professional staff appointments. 7.2, resolution regarding professional staff appointments. 7.3, resolution regarding civil service staff appointments. 7.4, resolution regarding APPR, annual professional performance review accountability. 7.5, resolution regarding per diem substitute appointments. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and it only came up just because of what Greg said about an hour ago about spring sports possibly getting rescheduled to the fall. I think maybe we should wait to vote on 7.1 just in case spring sports do get moved to the fall and we need coaches on that, because if I'm understanding correctly, 7.1 relates to the coaches of the spring, right?
Yeah, so the question becomes, and this is something we've gone back and forth on, the coaches are still, the practice that's happening universally across the region, I'm hesitant to say universal, but is that the coaches have been paid during this period of time as they're meeting with kids, and also at the same time that pre-work that they did. They should be reaching out to children at this time and keeping in touch and working with them virtually, of course. And then if the season should end, we would stop all payments.
Can you just further explain? So rescinding that would not be taking away?
No, we're not rescinding it. This one doesn't.
No, it's 7.2 that I think you're talking about.
Yeah, this is 7.2. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The 7.2 relates to the coaches. I think 7.1. I don't have, sorry, I can't open that one.
Yeah, so 7.2 is paying the coaches as if
Right.
actually delivering coaching. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes.
Yep. So we would still be paying them because the sports has not been officially
The
canceled.
season has not yet been officially canceled.
Okay, so it's saying we would continue to pay them,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was just trying to clarify because I didn't.
However, if the season, we're told the season's canceled, then the stance is that we probably cease to pay at that point. That's something that's been discussed. No official decision on it, but it would be considered.
If they get moved to the fall, though, that would technically not be a cancellation, correct?
Correct, but that would be another school year.
Okay.
The question for those staff members is, would they do it for the payment that they received during the 2021 or the 1920 school year?
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Audience recognition. Brian, is there anybody raising their hands right now in the audience?
Nope. Sharon's still with us, but no hands raised.
Okay,
Check the Q&A.
thank you.
Nope,
Thank you.
been addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Alm, for your help with hosting and keeping track of everything. Okay, I'd like to open it up now for board dialogue, continued board dialogue. Share anything, any meetings, committee meetings, or anything that you attended that you'd like to share with us and share with the public?
I can go real quick. Just a couple notes, two real quick, not meetings, but I actually want to thank my mom, who was sleeping in her office in Albany for the second straight night because of the budget vote and the need to be up there in public, in person, and not really want to sleep in a hotel and not want to drive back from Albany each day. So for the second night in a row, she's sleeping on her couch in her office in Albany. So I thank her. On a less, I don't know, an unfortunate note, I just want to share a classmate of mine who was a year older at OHS, passed away over the weekend, Joe Forte, from the virus. He currently lived in Yorktown or Cortland. His mom worked in the OHS one of the offices, principal. She was there a long time, Shirley Forte.
Yeah.
So just a sad, I don't know if there's other OHS grads that have passed so far, but just want to acknowledge Joe. And I did, in Lisa's absence today, join the Westchester School Board Association meeting with all the district school boards. It was 2 hours of every board going around talking about what's going on. There was three areas they asked people to highlight. I'll do that and I'll talk about one other. Spring break everybody is canceling their spring break in some version or another, even if they haven't done it as of this afternoon. They were probably having a meeting tonight to change the calendar. So there was not a district on who's not going to comply in one way or the other. Most were doing something like we are doing in terms of a hybrid, some teacher-led and some enrichment type activities available, and then respecting the religious holidays. Grading was one that came up. A lot of conversation about AP classes and regular grades. No one mentioned SUNY, so I mentioned SUNY just in terms of, I know AP's mentioned their plan. I assume at some point the SUNY schools will tell us what needs to be done for kids to get credit. And if pass, fail, and all that stuff will be acceptable. Graduation, I think we might even be a little ahead of the curve. Everyone's thinking about it. A couple of people are at Westchester County Center, which may or may not still be a hospital, but I shared that Ray, you and Stephen had sent out a message, and I think that was great on our part to get ahead of that one and just let people know it's happening. And then online learning, it was clear. I know there's some Facebook chat or another that other districts have nailed it and are doing great. It was clear from this call that nobody's perfected it. Everybody's learning. Everyone has some areas that are going better than others. Everyone's learning. Some resources, there's conversation about trying to share resources, which I'm assuming superintendents and other administrators are doing just to ramp up everyone's learning curve. But that was another topic for me that just should that nobody got on the call and said, like I said, we've nailed it. We're 100% there. We had a plan in advance. Everybody's running up the same curve. They will. I joke with Lisa. I assume they'll put together their comprehensive summary with a lot more detail on the call that Lisa was nice enough to do last time, and then they followed up with a detail. So I'll see what they include in their detail, and then if I see anything in my notes that they didn't cover, I'll add that the next day or two when they send that out. That was it.
I know when I was on the call last time, I know there's a discussion about the region exams and being that they are exit exams for our seniors graduating and certainly required for graduation for our students. My understanding is that the Board of Regents are meeting this coming Monday and Tuesday, and they'll be discussing that at the meeting. And I know that there's been a tremendous amount of advocacy around that in terms of, I think it's, unilaterally, people are asking for the Regents exams to be canceled at this point because of the difficulty in delivering new instruction or delivering the instruction for the Regent exams, and to come up with some guidance, very clear guidance of what schools should do. And also it was, continues to be discussed, about the grading for all the different grades, and especially in the high school. So thank you, Greg, for being on that call. It is, and it's really true, where there's difficulties even in the best resourced schools or schools that are smaller or that have, one-to-one technology for their students. My thoughts as like a parent and I've always hoped that our youngest learners didn't have tremendous exposures to screen time, less time, because I know how important in-person and activities are outside of the screen time that our children get. So for me, it never, and there's many districts that, again, are running up against this too, because they don't have emails for kindergartners to connect. So, it's very, I guess, humbling to know that we're not alone, but, I know that our kids and parents, are appreciative of any of the connections that we can get. And I know we're just going to keep getting better. And Dr. Sanchez, I know you mentioned the word, finding that right cadence and sweet spot, for lack of a better term. I don't know if we'll ever find one for everybody, but, you know, continuing to do that and sharing ideas and collaborating is, you know, of the utmost importance. And I know that our administrators are doing that, parents are doing that, and board members are doing that. So thank you, Greg, for being on that call.
Okay, just one last comment I made me think of. The two districts, Bedford and Portchester, both mentioned on the food distribution side that they've been disappointed in the number of people taking advantage of the opportunity. They were open to collaborating on ideas. I don't know what that form that takes, but if there's an interest in different communities, but they just shared their experiences. They haven't had as many people showing up to take advantage of that as they had expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the piece in all this that I think if there's an opportunity in here. There's been a lot of collaboration and sharing ideas. There always has been, but it's been elevated even further across the region. And we're all learning from each other because we're all innovating in different ways. You know, whether it's professional development or resources or anything else, even sharing ideas among superintendents, I could speak to them about, you know, how we're adapting and changing to executive orders, interpreting. It's been a real collaborative and effort across. It hasn't been districts working in isolation, but a real, you know, community of learners.
Frank? Oh, I thought Frank, sorry.
I mean, I'll just jump into I guess in addition to everything that's been mentioned, just Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES has been working they've put up some new professional learning, online learning for educators, and are also doing instruction remotely with a lot of the students in the tech center and special education where possible. So there's been a lot of efforts there throughout the region to kind of pull together and kind of evolve as we all need to in this time.
Yeah, in regards to that, I think right now we're in the thick of things and we're not really thinking too far into the future because it's kind of impossible in some areas. But I think if nothing else, we have to learn all the lessons there are to learn out of this experience. And, you know, because we're going to be resuming school at some point in a post-COVID-19 world, and what that looks like as far as how we prepare, I guess, for things like this, and not just as a school community, but just, you know, as a society. I think one thing this has done is illuminated a lot of the equity and access issues that already existed. And it's just a matter of, I guess, planning for that. I guess the irony is that, you know, in most schools throughout the country, the threats that we were preparing for are not the threats that we're facing now. And so, you know, it's kind of revisiting that and where our priorities lie in terms of preparing our students for, you know, these unknown type of variables. Just thinking back to the Westchester Putnam School Board Association event that Lisa, you, me, Frank, and I think Dr. Sanchez was there as well, about creating a community of responsible digital citizens, and how, you know, timely that was then. And I guess going forward, you know, being able to educate our students and even staff and parents on how to navigate, I guess, the digital world and how to be responsible digital citizens. I know, Dr. Sanchez, you were saying earlier that, you know, some issues are starting to arise with, you know, people being mindful that district policy still applies even in this unusual circumstance. And so, you know, just in terms of thinking of the future, perhaps those are things we might start introducing a bit more into the, I guess, the development of student and staff in the future. It's just, it's an interesting time we're in. I think all of us are feeling this in one way or another, and we can all empathize on a level probably previously we didn't before. And there's a lot to be learned from this. And I I look forward to seeing how we come out on the other end of this as a board, as a community, as a society, and you know, learn the lessons as hard as they are right now that need to be learned here. It's amazing just how, you know, how deep this has yet to become. I think, you know, as we've been talking here tonight, this is kind of only the beginning in terms of, you know, the struggles that we're going to be facing, whether it be financially, academically. Just so I think, you know, we'll get through it, but it's a matter of, you know, coming out on the other end wiser, having gone through it. Just one thing too, I think someone brought up about potential pass-fail grading policies. I know some, like at the college level, some people are doing that as an option. Like if you want the grade, you could get the grade. If you don't want the grade, you can have the pass-fail. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I know that there's, you know, talk about how to approach this so that it's equitable as far as how you know, the students come out on the other side of this academically. And that's about it. I mean, I've been just kind of, as all of us have, been just trying to keep up with everything, this moving target that keeps happening, and you know, attending, you know, this webinar, that webinar, and just trying to you know, stay up to speed on what it is that we need to know, and how we need to, I guess, best perform our duties.
I want to mention, you know, I know many community members are doing, I see through social media, just checking in on their neighbors. And I know that the Galata House has been arranging for meals for community members, hot meals, helping to distribute groceries, non-perishables from Feeding Westchester. And there's a lot of community members that are getting involved in delivering to people's porches, having a grab and go to supplement the school lunches. And I know school breakfasts and lunches, which are open to everyone, right? Dr. Sanchez, as you said, everybody who comes, you know, will be, certainly we're giving grab and go. But the community has come together as well to help the community at large with these meals. And I just really appreciative to everybody with those efforts. And we're seeing the numbers go up and up, people's needs, and some of it's financial hardships, and the other is people are really scared and want to stay home and don't even feel comfortable going to the grocery store, or don't even have the protective gloves or even, you know, masks to do so. So I just want to share that. So I've been seeing the numbers of need go up every week in that regard, and also the distribution of food from around the county. It seems as if what we were getting in our school district, or sorry, our town, is less and less because they're distributing among the needs of the other areas in Westchester. So it's ramping up quick. So just want to share that. But thank you to all the community members who are doing, and even the kind words on social media to people and helping each other out. It's a lot. So thanks. Thank you very much. I know Carrie Ann and Brian, please feel free to share something. I know you've been somewhat quiet. We'd love to hear your voices, and if feel free to just say hello to us.
I think it's mostly been covered. The only thing that I would add that was recognized last meeting, and I think deserves a lot of recognition this meeting, is that everyone is working so hard, faculty, staff, a lot of our students. You know, you said it earlier, we're trying to find that sweet spot, and we continue to find that sweet spot. But there's a lot of hard work going on and a lot of professional learning. You know, Carrie Ann and I and Ray set up these learning sessions this week, and they've been very, very well attended. Over 40 plus educators in every single one of our sessions. So a lot of hard work happening, and all around.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I really miss our so much.
Carrie, and your audio's a little delayed.
I just,
I'm going to interpret for her if that's okay. Having worked with her for a while, I'm confident. I think what she's saying is
I just missed all of the.
yeah, I'm pretty confident she's saying she misses our students.
Yeah, we really appreciate the videos that you know, several of you are doing, the principals, you know, Carrie Ann. It's just been really helpful. So, and I'd also I think I'd like to shout out to Illy Ortiz, our district clerk. Boy, that's
And I just want to say thank
sorry.
you to all of the educators in Ossining who are.
I think it was a lag. It was still going.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a. Listen, if
I like that last kick of a
next
car,
meeting.
just like that.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. And I want to just say thank you to Illy Ortiz, our district clerk, trying to keep up with all the guidance and memos and changing dates. And it's been quite a moving target as well. So thank you for that very much. We really appreciate that and keeping us on top of everything. And, you know, Nicole Reese keeping our website updated and getting out the oblasts and the, you know, and along with Illy getting out the press releases, just, you know, super quick and we really appreciate that. Really.
Thank you.
I think Carrie Ann might still be talking, but I don't see her lips moving. Did it get dark behind me yet, by the way, with the, the image doesn't get dark, by the way, it just stays at daytime.
Yep.
So, okay. Anybody else have anything else to report? Report out?
Just thank you to everyone out there who was, you know, all in on this, and it's not easy, but we're getting it done somehow, some way.
Hey, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'd like to take a motion to adjourn the special meeting of April 2nd, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, everybody.
I'm sorry, I got to look at Carrie Ann's face.
You can't do that. You can't do that.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Good
I
night.
have to laugh. I'm
Good
sorry.
Be
Thanks,
well,
everybody.
everybody. Be well. Thank
Have
you.
a great night. I'm going to stop the recording and the live stream now. We got our live stream, by the way. It did come up on YouTube. So
Yeah.